Okay, now, everybody knows the first line of the Chumash. Whether it's in English or in Hebrew, everybody knows the first line. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was tov vavohu, empty and void, light on the face of the water, the Tahom, and Ruach Elokim Merachefet al Hamayim. Everybody knows at least the first line. So I'm going to start with the second line. Not the second line, but the second chapter. Ele toldot hashamayim v'haaretz v'hi baram b'yom asot Hashem Elokim eretz v'shamayim. That starts after we finish the Bereshit story of the creation. We come right to there's a little piece about the Shabbat, 3-4 psukim, and then we start right away with the first organizational structure in the text. Ele Toldot is a organizational structure of the text that runs through the entire text, though it's much more of them in the first beginnings than at the end. But it does go through Moshe and Aaron, where it says in Bamidbar, talking about Moshe and Aaron, it says Ele Toldot. So Toldot is the first big arching organizational structure in the text. And we can talk about that some other time, because there's some very interesting things that I discovered about this. There are 4 different spellings with vavs missing and so forth. And then by some people it says vayomas, and they died, and by others it doesn't say anything. So there's a correlation between Ele Toldot, and then by Esav and Yaakov it does not say they died. It doesn't say vayomas. By Moshe it says vayomas. So of course, what's all this correlation? So that by itself has its own interest. We're not going to talk about that tonight. But what is the point? Ele Toldot, these are the developments of the Shemayim V'Aretz. Wait a minute. Before we have to talk, we want to say anything about the development, about how they develop further, there has to be Shemayim V'Aretz. So conceptually speaking, the Chumash does not begin with Bereshit Bara Elokim et Shemayim et Haaretz. It says, it really begins over here, Ele Toldot. And Bereshit means, in the simplest terms, at first. At first, before we begin to talk turkey about developments, okay, there has to be a universe, a world. Bereshit means firstly, at first. Period, no mystery, nothing. At first, okay. So now we come, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. The first point to understand is this. What do we get? We're starting off the text, and we have a hey hayediyah, et hashamayim, ve'et haaretz. The general rule in Torah is that if you're introducing something, it's not with a hey hayediyah. You would introduce the thing called Shemayim or Aretz. After you introduced it, the text now can refer to it with a hey hayediyah. So it says a man and then the man. But we don't start with the hey hayediyah. So the first question that should be pondered is, what is this all about? Why is it over here that we start with et ha Shemayim, et ha Aretz? Why is that? What's going on? Okay. The second word is bara. We're going to spend a few minutes. What does that mean? What does the term mean? In Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, There are basically three, there are a few more, but there are basically three words that relate to making, to producing. There's bara, there's asa, and there's yatzar. And these are three different words with three different packages of meaning. I want to spend a little time first on what does this bara mean? What does the word mean? So in linguistic terms, bara is the going forward of an action in the sense of something coming to be, produced as permanent, stable, always there, not going out of existence. One aspect of bara is permanence. That whatever is being made, quote, bara, created, whatever word you want to use, has a certain kind of a stability. The coming comes from something which generates. It brings forth by an interior action like fruit on a tree or a child from its parents. Bar, beis reish, is the idea of every active production with power, every conception, every innate movement tending to manifest exteriorly. The creative force of being, a product, produce, bara, corn. Bara is to draw from an unknown element to render same that which was other. An emanated production from a generative being to bring forth from the center to the circumference. The point being here that the bara has something to do with the unknown elements that are involved, like a birth of a child. If I have a set of blocks, a Lego, and I want to do something, that's not bara, because the parts are determinate and set up, and we now can put them together, and that putting together of determinate fixed parts is not carried by bara. You'll never find bara with that. Bara has to do with these 2 points. And further, in the Chumash text, the basic information concerning the meaning of bara comes from its use concerning the Tananim Hagdolim in 121. In the Chumash, bara, the second word of the text, but there's no explanation. There's no talk to help the reader pin down what it means. But in 121, talking about the Tanim Hagdolim, over there we see that there's some talk and therefore some clarification. Bara there, in relation to the Tananim, which we'll talk about later, what that means. But bara is not limited to these large sea creatures, but includes all life in the water and also bird life. Bara here means making in the sense of procreating. So we have a third element in the understanding of bara, the permanence and the procreation. The words asa and yatzar do not mean to make by procreation. Whenever there's a context of procreation of an animal or a human being, it will not say asa or yatzar, it will say bara. So here we're talking about the Tananim. The phrase, be fruitful and multiply, does not go with asar or yatzar, but only with bara. You check the psukim, you'll see that's the case. All of these life forms come to be by procreating. Fish are live bearers or egg bearers, egg layers. Birds procreate by the laying of eggs and their fertilization. And the Tananim Gedolim procreate by a birth process much like a land Adam. The heavens and the earth, however, were not procreated. We just got finished saying that one of the components, fundamental, is the procreation. Well, what do I mean? Shemayim v'aretz. What does that have to do with procreation? So we have to answer the question. What it says bara. In Torah Moshe, the fundamental characteristic of bara is fourth, the idea of something having been drawn from an unknown element. In other words, there is something that the heavens and the earth have in common with procreation, namely that the elements from which they come are not known. It is this characteristic of bara that allows it to be used concerning the heavens and the earth, and also concerning living beings that procreate. In the narrative, these existences are seen as finished products, But if one were to ask Moshe, what exactly are the elemental components of these things, he would say that he doesn't quite know. This not knowing of the elements of a thing is the fundamental characteristic of bara, which now moves away from procreation per se to a wider umbrella that includes different meanings. To it, in addition to living things that procreate, and especially humankind, and I give you all the psukim, bara is used concerning wondrous things. The crossing of the Yam Suf in the Exodus from Mitzrayim, Shemot 34:10. The opening up of the earth such that people got swallowed up in Bamidbar 16. In something wondrous, the elements are not known. There are only 8 places in Sefer Breshit where it says bara, and 5 places where it says bara with asa. Because you can switch and move from the pasuk of bara to a now we have the determinate parts, and so we can have asa that goes together with bara, but not yatsa. Okay. So the reason why it says bara in the Shamayim V'aretz is that in the world of experience, the Shamayim V'aretz are just there. They're out there, coming in, or coming as it were, from nowhere specifically, and from nothing in particular. In other words, in the world of experience, we don't deal with physics. David put as a subtitle to this talk that there's no cosmology. I hope to show you that in spades. Once and for all, this story has nothing to do with cosmology. It has nothing to do with the origin of the universe in physics. Cosmology deals with origin questions. We'll talk about that later. But this is a byproduct of this analysis. Okay, so Shamayim V'aretz are just out there, coming in as it were, from nowhere specifically and from nothing in particular. The heavens and the earth are 2 things that are related, relatively separable from each other. Each is what it is by reason of just being there. Putting form into pre-existing material is not at all relevant by reason of there not being anything that can reasonably be called the material out of which these things were formed. Bara fits the content of the pasuk, whereas to form, yatzar, does not. And by reason of the elements of the making not being known, bara fits where asa does not. Okay, so this is the basic understanding of the term bara, starting off with especially the procreation dimension and widening it up into this picture so that it accounts for a test case in Bamidbar or in Yetziat Mitzrayim when the word vayivra, bara, is used concerning some unusual thing that happened. Well, otherwise the burden is on you. You got to explain it. If you don't take this view of bara, then you got an exposition problem. The burden is on you to explain how does it come, how does it fit with these different things. The Tanim and the wondrous events, what do they have in common that allows the word bara to be used? Okay, there are a few more points on that, but I'm not going to spend the time to read them. But this is the basic understanding. Now, I said in passing, in the experiential world, the Chumash is not dealing with what we call the cosmos. The Chumash is dealing with the world of experience. I call it Olem Enoshi, the world of the human being. This is what we're talking about. It's 100% observable, and it includes indirect observation. When you hear your stomach growl or something, you can have indirect, but nothing is, quote, theoretical. Everything is an observable. You look out the window every day, the sun moves through this window. That statement is 100% true. When we bought the apartment or go for an apartment and we say, where does the sun come? And what's your light system and so on? Well, what are you talking about? That's important. That's fundamental. And it has nothing to do with the world of physics, the world of cosmology. The sun is exactly what it appears to be in the sky. A circle about this size, right, compared to other things in the sky, and that's its orientation, that's its position. This is fundamental to understand the story. If you come into the story with looking for a cosmology, you will run into all kinds of contradictions in the story, especially the one that everybody gets excited about, that on the fourth day the heavens were made, or the sun, the moon, and the stars were made, okay? But there was light on the first day. So how do we figure that? Light meaning daytime, 24 hours. The Chumash defines what it is. It's not talking about some mysterious thing or some physics thing or some energy form or whatever. It's talking straight ordinary language. Daylight. So, well, daylight presupposes the stars. So therefore there's an out of order problem. And you've got to now start to talk. How do we explain that fourth day? Well, from this orientation, there's no question. There's not a question to solve. There's no question here. Because we're not talking about the cosmos. As a matter of fact, when I wrote up the piece in the Perush on Bereshit, I explained the first, second, and third day. And then when it came to the fourth day, I said, ha ha ha, like a child. Here's the drawing of the first day, the second day, and the third day. Right? Here's the light, and here's the water, and then the land masses under the water. We'll talk about that right away. What's missing? Kids, what's missing? Of course! There's no stars. It's daytime, but at night stars come out. There's no moon. Shlomo, go to my little toy box where I have all those stickers, and get what we need. Get a sun, get a moon, get some stars. Paste them on the paper. That's exactly what is going on. The child world, a simple thing like that, when you ask the child, what is missing? Every child will answer, well, there's no stars, no moon, no sun. So what do? It's a flat top, like your paper is on the top, like on the ceiling. And okay, you don't want to go to the ceiling, we'll use the paper, but you can go to the ceiling, take your sticker, stick them on the thing, that's it. That's the story. We're talking not about anything cosmic in a physics framework. Therefore, this kind of a question dissolves as being totally irrelevant to the story. We have to explain what it means. We'll do right away, but it's irrelevant to the story. Okay, so the first point is to understand that we are dealing here in the text with the experiential world. The world of human experience, which has in it all of these different dimensions, but have nothing to do with what we call the cosmos, or the universe. Okay. Now we come to something that's related and only can be understood on this backdrop. V'ha'aretz hayta tohu v'vohu. What's that? Bohu means in it. Bo. In who? It. Bohu means in it. And tohu means surprisingly empty. It doesn't mean empty in the sense of empty and void. Taha means surprise, wondrously. So the word means, the phrase means, in it, haaretz. In what? You can answer right away. But in it, and surprisingly empty. Not empty and void. Surprisingly empty. And we have to explain what these words refer to. Okay. How do we get the second pasuk? Where did it come from? Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'haaretz. Good. Second pasuk. V'haaretz. Leaving the shamayim on the side for the moment. V'haaretz. Haita tovavo, and we give the rest, you know, choshech al pnei hadam. Where do we get that from? Was that observed? It wasn't observed. Where do we get the pasuk from? It relates to the meaning of surprisingly empty. Where do we get the surprise? Oh. The first point to understand in the story is that by removing in your mind, the reader is asked to remove the things that were made. I'm just using loose language, made because we finished the bara point. The things that were made on the sixth day are removed in thought, like a thought experiment. And then the things that were made on the fifth day, which is the fish and the bird life and so on, are removed in thought. Then we come to the fourth day, and we remove, step by step, the things that are ordinarily in my experience when I look out the window. There are people, there are animals, there are fish when they go to the store, and so on and so on and so on. So, in thought, there's a thought experiment where you remove all the things that were made, but do it backwards, and remove the stars that you pasted up like a child, and remove the landmass underneath the water, and remove the light, and you generate, by this thought experiment, you generate the second pasuk. In other words, by removing everything, and of course, ho ho ho! Isn't it surprising? Isn't that a big surprise? We're used to looking out the window and seeing a pussycat in Jerusalem, professors, pussycats, and rabbis. We're used to all this. Oh, take them away! No pussycats. Oh, no pussycats, no professors, no rabbis, and rats and all the rest. We're used to looking at the picture. We walk outside and we see the picture. The same. If you live in this house, you see the same picture every day. So, by removing these things one by one, you get the meaning of the term tohu, meaning surprisingly empty. Well, we just emptied it out in thought. So if we emptied it out, that's a big surprise. It's like seeing some photograph of something so desolate or so with no movement and no backdrop and so on. I'm sure you get pictures in photography. You can get a picture that comes at you, and just you just stand there and shiver because of the desolateness of the thing. So there we now have given an explanation of the meaning of tohu as surprisingly empty. Anybody who wants to give an explanation of the word must relate either to what I said or to give an alternative explanation for the meaning of taha. What is the surprising dimension here? I haven't found anything or anybody of the Meforshim who have adequately done this. Okay. Wait a minute, we're just beginning. The second pasuk says, Haaretz haita tovavo. Okay. Bohu means in it. What and what? The landmass was underneath the water. Like when you go to the beach, you see the slope of the sand, right? And as you're walking through the beach, all of a sudden, that water, a little low wave comes in, and you have to go in a little deeper, and you go a little further, and it drops. And the land mass is underneath the water. So Bohum is referring to the land mass that's underneath the water. Wait a minute. We didn't take away water. We didn't we didn't give our thought experiment to include water. Why not? Because it wasn't created. There's no place in the story where it says Yehi Mayim, let there be water. Well, if there was no place, then it falls outside the thought experiment. But the pasuk, the description of that second pasuk, is dominated by water. Well, we got to do some explaining. The Bereshit story takes place, the memory bound of the story is the meltdown and the beginning of the scientific revolution at about 10,000 BC. In other words, there was...
Beginning of the what revolution?
The agricultural revolution. Right. There was water. There was the meltdown, 10 meltdowns or whatever. And during those periods of 10 meltdowns over many, many years, there were significant changes in the ecology. There may have been even dinosaurs that lasted into this period and so forth, but became extinct in this last meltdown. The last meltdown, call it 10,000 BC, whatever you want to call it, it's not important in terms of the year, but we're talking small numbers and reasonable numbers. We have memory in culture for 3,000 years, so the human being at the time of this meltdown, agricultural revolution, is basically the same as he is today. We're not talking about any special hominoid or special evolutionary forms. These are way back in the history, and indeed, my sense is there was not even a memory of anything like that. The memory, if you had 10 ice ages, and the memory, would be very rare to think that their memory went, and a guy will tell you, oh, there were 10 of these, and so on. We, as a scientific people, so we have figured out long time scales for development of the cosmos, and in that cosmos we do put in a place the beginning of the agricultural revolution and the meltdown, like we can put in tsunamis and all the rest of the things. Okay, but what do we see? The story, the origin of the story, is an event coming in evolutionary terms way after the whole universe began and how it developed in the Big Bang and everything else. All of that is totally irrelevant to the story. So indeed, it's not only not a cosmology because of the experiential world, which doesn't deal with that. It's not a cosmology because the event that it does deal with is an observable event that had a memory, that there was such a thing where the water, if you live, they met somebody that say, guy came from Sweden, and he said, oh, I was told in our society, my father and grandfather, he said, oh, in Sweden and Norway, wow, it was plush green. The earth was plush green from the amount of water. It was closer to the North Pole. So the water seems to have come down from the north into the temperate zone and so on. Somebody even asked me a question, which was good, I never researched it, whether or not indeed the water did come down to this part of the world, of the globe. Okay, but even if it didn't, and it stopped somewhere, there was basically this memory of the water coming from meltdown, and that is the origin of the story. The origin of the story is a relational origin, has nothing to do with what later became yesh mi'ayin, something from something or something from nothing. All of this is totally irrelevant to the story. We'll come back to it when we talk about Elohim, which I skipped over. But I'm just giving now the meaning of the words and the picture that it's presenting. And so what we have over here is the reason it doesn't take away water is because water was the natural condition when you looked out your window from the meltdown. So of course, if you didn't take it away, then you can't restore it. And indeed, you didn't want to restore it. I asked a number of people over the years in cosmology, understanding of the text, why doesn't it say Yehi Mayim? Water is essential for the life system. So it should have said, if I were writing the book, and I was talking about here a evolutionary process of the development of different stages and so forth, well, I certainly would put in the fifth day or third day or somewhere, I'd put in Yehi Mayim, let there be water. Vayehi Mayim, and there was water. The fact that it's not in the form of the rest of the creations which go according to Yehi. A very deep point, which we'll get to a little later. The form of the creation is each one has the thing, Yehi, Vayehi. Yehi or, Vayehi or. Yehi, Vayehi. And that's the format. We're going to get to that a little later or some other time. But at least the point now is that we're dealing with a period of time, which is the general idea of the agricultural revolution, that went with the meltdown, and it's dealing with origin in the proper and simple empirical way that we deal with origin questions. There, even in cosmology, there is no absolute origin. Every origin question is relational. In relation to the solar system, we have a singularity and so on and so on and so on. Big Bang. Everybody thought when Hawking came out with his book on time, whoa, the philosophers are going to have a picnic. He solved the problem. He solved the problem of the Chumash, the problem of creation. I even have him on tape. In one later interview, he said, look, he says, don't put me in that category. I'm not a believer, but this has nothing to do with the issue. Everything that functions as an origin is in one and the same universe. There's nothing outside of the totality. So when you say God created, that's what's going on here. God, you right away bring in an assumption that God is outside the universe. Whoa, that's not in the story. You want to accept it on other grounds, but it's not in the story. We'll deal with that when we deal with what Elohim means. But the point is that we're dealing now with a commonsensical, experiential world which has these aspects in it. And indeed, no Yehimayim. No Yehimayim. Okay. How do we know this is correct? What happens if you read the second day? The first day is Vayehi Or. Let there be light. Nothing to do with the Mayan. Right? It said darkness was on the face of the water. So the first day is Yehi Or. Nothing to do with Mayan. Well, we're dealing with a making story. Forget about who's doing it. Kim is doing it. Forget about that for the moment. But we're dealing with a making story. Okay. So I wanted to say, it says it says Vayehi Or. We're dealing with a making story. When did the maker begin to work? You can't work in the dark. You have to have light. So he began to make the cosmos, to make the world that we're talking about when there was light. You can't work in the dark. So that's why the first day says, Yehi Or, let there be light, so I can work. HaKadosh Baruch Hu in effect says, look, you want me to create a universe? He's talking to somebody else, and he says, oh, these guys are crazy. You want me to make a universe or make a experiential world, and they don't give me light to make it. It has to be light. And the text says, he called the Yom, he called the light Yom. Day, light, 24-hour thing, nothing to do with cosmos, nothing to do with energy, nothing to do with anything cosmic. As simple, like a child can understand the text when it's put like this, so simple. And that's the greatness of this piece of the creation story. So, Yehi Or. Indeed, B'derech Hagav, that solves the problem why it says Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Boker. Well, the story comes in, Elohim did something. He did it in the morning. The day begins in the morning. Okay? And of course, when you get dark in the evening, you have to stop and go to sleep, rest up, and then start the next day. So that's why it says, Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Boker, and not Vayehi Boker, Vayehi Erev. Because the Maker, He started in the morning, but the story doesn't enter. When he started, the story enters, he did the work. Now we're coming to the evening, I gotta rest. So that same point explains why it says Vahi Erev Vayivoker. Okay, and V'derech Agav, in the tradition of Torah, in Chazal say that, I think they put it before Matan Torah, the day began with the morning. After Matan Torah, our calendaring begins with the evening. This is a separate issue in the halakha, but the basic point in the text that makes sense, it says Yehi Or, because you can't work in the dark. Now, if we look at second day, what happened? So everything was water. So the second day is differentiating between the things that are on top of the rakia, the horizon, and things below the horizon. When I used to live in Long Beach, and in Far Rockaway, I used to take a morning constitutional to go to shul, and I got stopped by the police many times. Said, you don't walk around here in the middle of the night. Okay, it was 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. But to walk on the boardwalk, and see the sun come up, and it always hit me. Whenever you go there every morning and you see this thing, this vision, Well, if you hold your head like this, you see the water and the sand, the beach. Then you go up. They used to think I'm crazy, the cops. They watched me for a while, and they see the crazy guy going like this. He's lifting up his head, and he's seeing the horizon. And you really see the line. There's the horizon. And on this side of the horizon is the water. And on that side of the horizon is the Shemayim. And so the second day is the differentiation, putting some little structure into the whole thing, which is just mind, water, always. All which way, what way, and so on, water. Third day, Yikfu et hamayim. If you're looking from the top, what you would see would be the land mass is underneath the water, two parallel lines. One is the water surface, one is the land mass underneath the water surface, two parallel lines. Okay? And so, what happened? He pushed the water together. If you were looking from the top, what would you see? You would see the area where the water was pushed away. That's called Yabasha, dry land. Why? Because there's no water and he just pushed the water away. So the text is exact. There are words Adama and Aretz, and the word Yabasha is used there in the text because that's exactly what happened. He pushed the water together. If you're looking from the top view, you would see land where there's no water on it. Okay? And what more is that? What else do you see? You see water in the middle, surrounded by land. If we're assuming he started this way, the water is, we take the ends and we're pushing it together. Okay? So if you look down, you see the Yabasha. It's the same thing the other way. If you don't start at the end, you start in the middle. It comes out to be the same way. You see the same picture. What you get is to see that you have a body of water surrounded by dry land. What is the definition of a sea? It says Yamim. The definition of a sea is water surrounded by land. The definition of an ocean is land surrounded by water. An atoll in the Pacific, okay, when you just look back, an atoll in the Pacific is a little dot of land surrounded by water. If the geography of this area was an atoll in the Pacific, the story would read the other way around, where when you look from the top, you would see the water surrounding this little thing called the land, the Yabasha. It turns out to be the same thing, but the point is that the geography of this area is such that it's not an atoll in the Pacific. And so the text rightly says, he pushed together the water, he saw the Yabasha, the land with no water on top of it, okay, and he called that Aretz, and then he called the water on top of the Rakia Shamayim, where the water, the rain comes from, Shamayim. Okay, but the point is here that we've explained the third day as indicative, as a consequence, a reasonable consequence of what we started with. We're now trying to get a picture of how the world came to be, look like what we see out the window. We're trying to get a picture. So we're making an imaginary picture. Here was the landmass under the water, he pushed the water together, and what was made was these different things. Okay, so we've explained now and showed a coherent understanding package of the assumption that the memory bound of the story was the meltdown, where water was the common thing, and now we're putting some structure into that picture, and we're going to come out with the restoration of the world that we took away in thought. We're going to start now to create those things that we took away in thought. Okay. Now we come to the important problem, and we'll have for questions, plenty of time. Now we come to the important problem of Vayihi Erev, explain, Vayihi Boker, Yom Echad. Oh, Vayihi Erev Boker, Yom Sheni, Shlishi, Revi'i, Chamishi, Shishi. Wait a minute. The text is getting you crazy. A cardinal number is a cardinal number, and an ordinal number is an ordinal number. And the twain shall never meet. So what is the text talking about? Make up your mind, Chumash. You want to talk about Yom Rishon, then it makes sense. Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni, Yom Shishi, ordinal numbers. You're telling me Yom Echad, cardinal number, then you stop. Continue with cardinal numbers. In each we say day 1, cardinal, day 2, day 3. Don't mishmash. What's going on here? Stick with one or the other. Stick with ordinal numbers, it should say Yom Rishon. Or stick with cardinal numbers, it should be Yom Echad, and then Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi. Stick with the numbers. What are we talking about? There's a difference between the use of cardinal numbers and the use of ordinal numbers. When I make a list, a shopping list, something has to be, quote, top. I have to write. So in order to write, I have to put down milk, eggs, cheese, so on, so on, so on. But, strictly speaking in concept, I didn't have to put milk first. I could have put cheese first. I'm making a list. Now, of course, when we go shopping, we figure where it is, so make it easy, Now I don't shop anymore, so Linda's the problem. But the point is, it's a list. It's an enumeration. An enumeration uses cardinal numbers, but it's not sequential. There's no sequence. In cardinal numbers, there's no sequence. Where I put 1 could be number 2 and vice versa. In ordinal numbers, there's a sequence. So if the story is meant to be ordinal numbers, not only don't we have Yehi Mayim and in its proper place, we have vegetation, a life form, vegetation coming out of that picture in the second day. There was deshe. Of course, it was plush green. The third day. It was plush green. So there was grass that grew just as automatic. There was no farmer. There was no somebody to plant. It just was there. It was a seed. It just grew. Well, if it's developmental, that's out of place. What, that's like even a by the by. It's no big deal. Just in one little phrase it says, well, and there was this desha. So people explain, oh, it was potential, but it didn't come out. Well, that's a construction on the text based on a number of assumptions that are not in the text, and therefore you get pseudo questions like that one. What's a pseudo question? So the point is, the story is not ordinal number story because it's a list. But it is ordinal number story. Yom Sheni, ordinal number, Yom Shlishi. So, if the Shabbat, which is Yom Shvi'i, if the Shabbat was not in the story, for whatever the reason, I don't care. Not interested. There's 3-4 psukim that after the creation story that deal with the Shabbat. Shabbat is Yom HaShvi'i. For whatever the reason, which is not for now, why Shabbat was included in the story, in the whole piece, it's because Shabbat was included, and Shabbat is Yom Shvi'i. Therefore, we have each day taking on an ordinal meaning. Not in any cosmic sense, not in any evolutionary sense, just in terms of sequence. Because the Shabbat is the seventh day. If it said Yom Sheva, cardinal number, then this analysis doesn't hold. But it deals with Yom Echad, switches to ordinal numbers, including the Shabbat, right? Yeah. And so what we have here, the message that's getting across in the use of Yom Echad and the switch to ordinal numbers is these two dimensions. One is, strictly speaking, the things that were made constitutes a list, an enumeration. And any questions that have to do with sequence in a developmental sense are wholly irrelevant to the story. It has nothing to do with development. Indeed, Ele toldot hashamayim v'aretz. After we have something to talk about, what are we going to talk about? The first thing we're going to talk about is developments. Toldot doesn't mean birth. It means births, but it also means developments. The dynamic aspect, how things are going to go. And then we'll deal with sequence. Because that's important from the point of view of understanding the Toldot. So, oh yeah, our concern is going to be the next two chapters, which deal with the Gan Eden story and man-woman relation. It has 6 or 7 topics in there. Each one is unbelievably profound. But the point over here is that, in relating to the point I make about Yom HaShvi'i, if the Shabbat was not included, we would have a list, and the list implies no sequence, no developmental talk. That's the next section of the book. The next section of the book deals with development and presupposes this first understanding. Okay. A number of points that we're going to really save, but to note, what does this story teach? The basic form in the story is Yehi. Yehi or. Yehi is the form of a performative. A performative utterance is such that when a person says Harei at mikudeshet li or Harei zeh korban, that form of words, which usually goes together with an act, giving a ring, christening a ship with a bottle of champagne, you have to have the act that some kind of like substantializes the words. But basically, it's the words. I pronounce you Queen Elizabeth. That's the ship. There's the bottle. And you want to drink the champagne? You can go wait online. But the point is, this is a performative. Yehi is the word in the text that is the vehicle for the production, for the making. In a contemporary language, so I say it's the performative utterance, it's a performative, and the basic understanding in the text that comes from this idea of performative is something that's intrinsic to the experiential world. A thing is what it appears to be, what it's taken as. If I look at you and say, oh, ugly, at that moment in the speech, that's how I take you. That's how you appear to me. So therefore, how you appear to me is intrinsic and fundamental basis of the experiential world. We call it operational definitions. The better way, more rich, because a lot of things come out of the performative, is the idea of a performative, where you have this, in a sense, the way I take it. In the old pragmatist language, when the guy was, Charles Sanders Peirce left 80,000 pages in manuscript and had to run in with William James at Harvard. They didn't take him, and he got this and that. He lived in New York. He burnt paper to keep warm. So when he looked at his desk and he saw all this stuff, that was firewood. It wasn't paper. A thing is its use, or as it appears to us. There's different ways of formulating it depending on where you want to put the emphasis, on the operations or on the chalos. As you know from hearing me, I put the emphasis on the performative because there's so much, as you'll see in future sessions, that's so much that comes out of the performative. But the basic idea over here is a thing is what it's taken to be. And that's intrinsic to the experiential world. So we're not dealing with what a thing is in any sense of material, what it's made out of, material causes, or how it functions in a causal scheme. We're dealing with how it appears to me. When it appears as affecting something, as being involved in something, so now, because cause and effect become a subset of these, how it's taken to be, what it looks like. So, that's a separate point, very important. Another point of the story is it says Tov, except for the second day, because the work wasn't finished. In each of the days, it says God looked at the thing He made and He had Tov. Where did it come from? What do you mean by He Tov? What's the chiddush here? It's repeated in every one of the days. Where does that come from? And the big question that we left, there are two names for God in the Chumash, main names. One is Hashem, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, and one is Elohim. There are two names, no machloket. How to understand that? Big machloket. But the fact that there are two names for God in the text, nobody argues. They have others, they have Kale and other names, but the basic two names are Hashem and Elohim. So, we asked why Tov? We asked why Elohim? There's no Hashem in this story. As you know from hearing me before, the little things, or shall I say the big things, were left for the little guys, all the big guys. But the point is, all the Mefarshim make note of the difference or the use of the two different names, but nobody took the trouble to discuss every single name in the text and ask the question, why does it say in this story Hashem? Why does it say in this story Elohim? Why does it say in this story both? Why does it start with one and switch to the other? Nobody took the trouble to do the entire text. There's 1,800 places where it says Hashem, and 200 places or so where it says Elohim. The Perush, that runs 1,000 pages, deals with one question only. Why does it say one rather than the other and have the switches? Of course, as you heard me, I needed a unit. I have to have a unit where the story begins, where the story ends. That's a separate issue. I built it on what's called Ptuchot and Stumot, where in the text, the typography is that it has a line. The line finishes and it's all open, and then the text starts at the next line. Or someplace there's a few spaces and the text continues on the same line. I needed a unit to give an opening of the story and a closing. Otherwise, I don't know whether suppose there's an Elohim at the end of the story, but I didn't include it, so I have a mishmash. I don't know what to do. So I made a stand on taking these typographical differences in terms of the space. And there are some differences between the Keter version that's on your computer with the Bar-Ilan program and the Masorati version. I put them both in because in some places I think it should have said Stuma, closed. In some places it should have said Ptucha, open. But lo and behold, they don't match 100%. There are some places in one version of the text there's nothing, and in the other version there is, and vice versa, and so on. All the combinations. Okay, so I just noted that. But the point is, once you have the unit, then you could ask with reasonability, why is this story an Elohim story? 32 places, wherever it is, and not an Hashem story. And the last point that we're going to talk about, or at least introduce, we read the pasuk, Eile toldot hashamayim v'aretz behi baram, when they were bore, when they were made. That's the word bara. But notice, who is the subject here? Who made? The story says Elohim made, right? Bereshit bara Elohim. But in the development part of the story, it says, yes, Eila Tol Shemayim V'Aretz, Behi Baram, when they were made, cooked by Elohim. Aha, food. Biyom Asot Hashem Elohim Eretz V'Shamayim. Hey, wait a minute. We didn't even get started with the text, the contradiction. The first story said Elohim made this ordinary world. The pasuk that starts developments refers back to that by the word Behi Baram, bara, okay? But then it finishes with Asa, and I said before, Asa can go together with bara. Once you have the bara, then you can talk about the making and putting it together. But it says here, Biyom, at the time, Asot Hashem Elohim Eretz V'Shamayim. It's Hashem Elohim and not Elohim. And it's Eretz V'Shamayim. It's switched around the order. In the Bereshit story, or in the first part of the pasuk, it's Shamayim V'Aretz. Bereshit bara Elohim Shamayim V'Aretz. Eila Toldo Shamayim V'Aretz. The end of the pasuk, it's Aretz V'Shamayim. Well, you could figure that out. Why? What's going to be the development here? Agricultural revolution. As you're going to read the story, you're going to see, we're going to talk, Hevel story, kind of Hevel, one was a shepherd, one was a farmer. We have the whole basic material in the text. As you'll see, we're dealing with the agricultural revolution. That's what the development's going to be about. How this developed. From this beginning point, how did this develop? And then we have to answer the question, how does woman come in, and what's the story, and busha, and clothing, and all the beautiful topics that are in the text. Basar achad, and so on and so on. But the basic point is that in this pasuk, we have introduced for the first time what looks like a contradiction. Most people say, well, look, Hashem Elokim is the personal name and the generic name. Elokim is a generic, to wit, it has Elohim Achirim, which is a plural and a generic term. And Hashem is the personal name. We have personal God. That's not necessarily the case. And I, for one, do not accept that explanation. I say what's been said over here is that there's a two-part name. In effect, it's simply stated without the detail for the moment, there are three names for HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the text. There's Elokim, there's Hashem, and there's Hashem Elokim. But lo and behold, Hashem Elokim only appears in the Gan Eden story in the next two chapters. And one has to explain that. There's one exception, which I explained. In 9:30 about the plagues, there's a piece there which Moshe is talking to Paro. Paro admits that he uses, in the beginning of the story, he didn't know who this Hashem was. At the end of the story, he knows who he is, and he's got to take heed. And Moshe Rabbeinu says and this and that, and the word Hashem Elokim is used. The only place outside of the story of the two-part name where the two-part name is used. Now look, if you reading a text where the name appears once in the text, you're reading a novel, and the name appears once in the text. If you don't, you're a biblical literary critic, and you don't catch, what the hell is this guy doing? What does this author mean when he's putting in once only? Suppose you went to the bathroom and you forgot to read that part, or you skipped over fast, and you don't remember. You lie. If it's only once, he put it in for a reason. He wants to get across something. So there are so many beautiful places in the Chumash which could carry both names. Why only in this story? And what's it all about? Hashem Elokim, to me, is a two-part name. Conceptually, it could be Elokim Hashem, or Elokim Hashem, or Hashem Elokim. They're two-part names. Of course, we would say, my name is Joseph David. You call me Joseph, that's not me. You call me David, that's not me. You have to call me by my both names. So we have family names and so on, and Joseph, the order becomes important. So if you say David Joseph, I don't answer. You say Joseph David, that's me. But that's in names for people and so on. But conceptually speaking, what we have here is a two-part name. And you'll ask anybody tomorrow in shul, where's the first place it says Hashem in the Chumash? I'll take a penny for everyone. I'll fill up my pushka. I'll take a penny for everyone. Every person will say the first place it says Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, in the Chumash is Ele Tolel Shemayim V'Aretz B'Hi Baram B'Yom Asa Hashem. The Elokim is the generic term. So the first place it says Hashem in the text is in this piece which introduces the Gan Eden story and the things that go with it. But in the Kayin story, which is chapter 4, the puzzle is to understand what is that story all about when it seems to be concerned with the thing. Adam had relations with his wife Chava, and they gave birth to Cain. Okay? Kaniti ish et Hashem. No Elokim. So I would say the first place where it says Hashem in the Chumash is not in the beginning of the Eila Toldot, please. That's the two names together. But the first place it says Hashem without Elokim is in the Kayin story. Kaniti ish et Hashem. It doesn't say et Elokim. It doesn't say, whatever it means, whatever the explanation is. It certainly doesn't mean she had relations with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's obvious. She had relations with Adam, it says in Befurash, and she gave birth to Cain. There's no naming of Cain, it's just there. As if we know who we're talking about. Usually there's gave birth and there's a name. Okay, that's the usual pattern. Over here, it's not. All those things are to be explained when you deal with the story of the Cain story and the text. All these things are explained and worked out clearly to understand. But the basic point now is that that story deals with Hashem. And it's the first place in the text that deals with Hashem. And the other two stories deal with Hashem Elokim and Elokim. And it turns out, we asked the question about Tov. Why does it say Tov? Because in the second and third chapters, we get the definitions of Hashem and Elokim in the story. How to use them in the text. They are what was called operational definitions. The Nachash says to Chava that if you eat from the Eitz Hadat Tov V'Ra, you'll be like Elokim. Yodei Tov V'Ra. That is the operational definition of Elokim. It comes under the category of knowledge of good and bad, judgment, order, structuration, and a whole family of meanings that come under Elokim. And the reader who reads the Chumash will understand that between the lines it just said, that's explicit. If you eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, you'd be like Elokim. Which implies that if you eat from the Eitz HaChaim, the other tree in the garden, you become Chaim. The definitions to be used in the text, respectively, of Hashem and Elokim, are and come from the Eitz Hadas, Eitz HaChaim story, which we're not going to deal with tonight in any depth or anything. Just to mention that, conceptually speaking, the second story, introduced by Eila Toldot, which includes the definitions of Hashem and Elokim, is really, conceptually, the beginning of the text. Sequentially, literally, yes, before we can talk about the developments, we have to have a universe. We have to have a world. Okay? So literally, we say at first, okay, before we start to do the real stuff of developments, what happened, we're going to say there has to be something there. Yes. But to understand the Bereshit story, you have to understand the second story. Otherwise, you can't explain except, why is it Tov? Why is it Tov? Okay, good. Because Baruch Hu made it, it's Tov. Why is it Tov? At least when you have nothing, you have nothing. Doesn't mean you explain. But if you have something that makes sense and is reasonable, well, then the burden of exposition shifts to somebody who says, I'll give you another explanation for Tov. It's an Elokim story, so Elokim is Yodei Tov V'Ra, that's the fundamental property, so why should we be annoyed or excited or disturbed that it says Tov? So we don't have to bring anything from outside the text. That in the eye of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, everything that was made has a beauty and a utility, and it's made for the benefit of human being, and blah, 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 blah. We can build up a whole theological perspective. Beautiful, and nothing wrong with that. But in the text per se, we have it much more tightly interconnected. So that what I'm saying now is that if you understand the second story, in retroaction, or retrodiction, you can understand the first. But not vice versa. You have to get the basic meanings of these terms. Now, there's a esoteric in this. I'm not going to talk about that at all. There's just the point of tonight was to indicate that this Breshit story, unlike maybe other stories, maybe in the Nevi'im and Yeshayahu and other places, they come in a much later period of time, historically, 800, 850 BCE, it's not 1350 BCE, and so on and so on. I'm not dealing with the history, not dealing with any of that. The point is to show that in this story, one has to conclude that the story is about the ordinary world, the world of experience, and it is in no way a cosmology, which means that any questions about cosmological domain are irrelevant to the story. They may be relevant to other stories, other material in the Tanakh, but not in the Chumash. Before we have to talk, we want to say anything about the development, about how they develop further, there has to be Shemayim La'aretz. So conceptually speaking, the Chumash does not begin with Breshit Bara Elokim et Shemayim et Haaretz. It says, it really begins over here, Ele Tolo. And Bereshit means, in the simplest terms, at first. At first, before we begin to talk Turkey about developments, okay, there has to be a universe, a world. Bereshit means firstly, at first. Period, no mystery, nothing. At first, okay. So now we come, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. The first point to understand is this. What do we get? We're starting off the text, and we have a Hey Hayadiyah, et hashamayim, ve'et haaretz. The general rule in Torah is that if you're introducing something, it's not with a Hey Hayadiyah. You would introduce the thing called Shemayim, or Aretz. After you introduced it, the text now can refer to it with a Hey Hayadiyah. So it says a man, and then the man. But we don't start with the Hey Hayadiyah. So the first question that should be pondered is, what is this all about? Why is it over here that we start with et ha Shemayim, et ha Aretz? Why is that? What's going on? Okay. The second word is bara. We're going to spend a few minutes. What does that mean? What does the term mean? In Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, there are basically three, there are a few more, but there are basically three words that relate to making, to producing. There's bara, there's asa, and there's yatzar. And these are three different words with three different packages of meaning. I want to spend a little time first on what does this bara mean? What does the word mean? So in linguistic terms, bara is the going forward of an action in the sense of something coming to be, produced as permanent, stable, always there, not going out of existence. One aspect of bara. Okay, now, everybody knows the first line of the Chumash. Whether it's in English or in Hebrew, everybody knows the first line. Right. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was tov vavohu, empty and void, light on the face of the water, the tahom, and ruach elokim merachefet al hamayim. Everybody knows at least the first line. So I'm going to start with the second line. Not the second line, but the second chapter. Ele toldot hashamayim v'haaretz v'hi baram b'yom asot Hashem Elokim eretz v'shamayim. That starts after we finish the Bereshit story of the creation. We come right to there's a little piece about the Shabbat, 3-4 psukim, and then we start right away with the first organizational structure in the text. Ele Toldot is a organizational structure of the text that runs through the entire Torah, is permanence. That whatever is being made, quote, bara, created, whatever word you want to use, has a certain kind of stability. The coming comes from something which generates. It brings forth by an interior action like fruit on a tree or a child from its parents. Bar, Beis Reish, is the idea of every active production with power, every conception, every innate movement tending to manifest exteriorly. The creative force of being, a product, produce, bara, corn. Bara is to draw from an unknown element to render same that which was other. An emanated production from a generative being to bring forth from the center to the circumference. The point being here that the bara has something to do with the unknown elements that are involved, like a birth of a child. If I have a set of blocks, a Lego, and I want to do something, that's not bara, because the parts are determinate and set up, and we now can put them together, and that putting together of determinate fixed parts is not carried by bara. You'll never find bara with that. Bara has to do with text, though it's much more of them in the first beginnings than at the end. But it does go through Moshe and Aaron, where it says in Bamidbar, talking about Moshe and Aaron, it says Ele Toldot. So Toldot is the first big arching organizational structure in the text. And we can talk about that some other time, because there's some very interesting things that I discovered about this. There are 4 different spellings with vowels missing and so forth. And then by some people it says Vayomas, and they died, and by others it doesn't say anything. So there's a correlation between Ele Toldot, and then by Esav and Yaakov it does not say they died. It doesn't say Vayomas. By Moshe it says Vayomas. So of course, what's all this correlation? So that by itself has its own interest. We're not going to talk about that tonight. But what is the point? Ele Toldot, these are the developments of the Shemayim V'Aretz. Wait a minute!